So recently I felt inspired to talk about my Super Nintendo collection. I've been wanting to make this video for a few months now. It's been in the back of my head, so I decided I'd give it a shot. So the Super Nintendo could be my favorite video game console, and as a collector, I actually don't own that many Super Nintendo games at all. I definitely own more Nintendo 64 and GameCube games, and even NES games I own more, but I think in terms of just straight up quality of games, I think nothing is better than the Super Nintendo. The the number of sheer amazing 10 out of 10 games on the system. I feel like there's more 10 out of 10 games on the system than there is on, say, GameCube and 64. And my favorite system of all time is probably either Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64, and then third place would probably be for the GameCube. But yeah, this is my Super Nintendo. I got this, I think, back in, I want to say 2008. It served me well since then, and I just want to start talking about some of the games. So the first one I own is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. So this is an awesome 2D Zelda game. It improved on Zelda 1 in so many ways. Really interesting dungeon design, bunch more items, great music. It was an amazing improvement in terms of 2D Zelda. Actually, my favorite Zelda game is Zelda 1, the original one for the Nintendo Entertainment System, but this is a 10 out of 10 game, one of the best on the system. The only thing I'll say is I feel like some of the dungeon design is kind of annoying. Most of the time, the dungeon design is amazing. There's a few dungeons that are a little bit gimmicky, and I felt maybe it didn't age that well, but still an absolutely amazing Super Nintendo game and a must-have for your Super Nintendo collection. The next game is Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. I actually basically have not played this one. Uh, I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was during the early days of COVID, I needed a new Wii. My Wii had broken. My Wii from like 2007 broke, and I need to get a new Wii. And actually, at that time, the prices were kind of inflated for retro gaming. I think I bought that Wii for $110, and it's still the Wii I use now. But because I spent so much, they gave me like a $15 or $10 game for free. Like it came with a free game, and this was the only interesting game there was there. That Retro Games Plus, which is a retro gaming store that I went to, was kind of barren. So this was only one that looked like interesting, and it was a little bit more expensive than that they were saying, but they let me have it, and I actually have not played it. And it's interesting because since then I've become quite a Final Fantasy fan. So this one, it would be interesting to play. I've seen some footage of it. I know that it's sort of a beginner RPG. It's meant for, like, I guess, kids who haven't really done any RPGs. I wouldn't need that. I've played more complicated RPGs, but it'll be interesting to give this a try one day. Super Mario Kart. Wow. So I've owned this game since around the time I got the Super Nintendo. It was only really in the past year that I really got into this game. This game is so challenging. Beating this game, beating the 150cc Special Cup is one of the greatest game accomplishments I've ever had. I'm not even kidding you. I had to grind and train to even beat that Special Cup 150cc one time. I've only beaten it one time, and it literally took months of me trying it. Like about a year ago, I started trying to beat it, and I played it for like a couple months, never beat it. And then finally, a few months ago, I came back to it, and I eventually beat it. That's one of the highlight gaming moments of my life, one of the highlight challenges I've accomplished in gaming. And this is just a great game. I think part of the reason I like it so much is that it's so challenging. I do enjoy a challenging game. But I think that this game, I think a lot of people consider it to be one of the weaker Mario Kart games. I mean, obviously it was the first one. I do not think it's one of the weaker ones. I think the level of challenge it gives, it's easily the hardest Super Mario Kart, or it's easily the hardest Mario Kart game out there, which I truly appreciate as in terms of replayability. It's really rewarding to finally beat this game, but I will tell you it's very hard. And another complaint people have is that the level designs are kind of reused. Like there's 4 different Mario circuits that all look the same, like 2 different Donut Plains levels. But I mean, granted, with all that stuff, I still think it aged well, and I still think it's one of my favorite Mario Kart games. Super Mario World, this is, I would say, my favorite 2D Mario adventure. I played this game a lot as a kid on the Game Boy Advance remake, and I would say that this is my favorite 2D platforming Mario game. I think it's better than Super Mario Bros. 3, and it's just a great improvement on the NES Mario games. You got Yoshi introduced, and it's a really good time. I would like to play through it again and do maybe a full 96 exit run of it. But yeah, an awesome platformer which revolutionized gaming. And then here we got Yoshi's Island, the sequel to Super Mario World. This is another game that I had on the Game Boy Advance that I played a lot of on the Game Boy Advance. A really interesting, it's totally different than Super Mario World, even though it's Super Mario World 2. It's a really fun game, very unique, a great platformer. The dynamics of it are very different. But obviously, I would recommend this. It's a classic Nintendo game. It's been a while since I did a true playthrough of Yoshi's Island, so I'd recommend this one as well. Tetris 2, this is just one random game I guess I got from Goodwill. I barely played this. I've like fired this up like a couple times. It's just one of those games that happened to come into my collection that I haven't really spent that much time with. Donkey Kong Country. Wow. So this is an extremely important game in my life. A very important game in my life. The Donkey Kong Country trilogy, I would say 2 of those games are in my top 10 video games of all time. I would say definitely this one is in my top 10, and Donkey Kong Country 2 is even better. I'll get into that in a sec, but this totally changed my life, this game. It's just such beautiful music, atmosphere, the best, tightest controls of a platformer. Unbelievable how this game controls and how this game feels to play. It's such a rewarding platformer. It feels better to play than Super Mario World by a lot, which is saying something because I think Super Mario World's the best 2D Mario platformer. And I actually got sort of into casually speedrunning this game. I was able to beat this game in under an hour without any glitches. So that was a fun thing to try to accomplish, but just a completely life-changing game for me. I've been playing this game since I was a kid. I used to play it on the Wii Virtual Console. Just, I can't explain to you how much this game means to me. It's really a one of a kind game that I'm extremely thankful that they made back in 1994. Super Mario All-Stars. This is a compilation of all the NES Mario games into the Super Nintendo. They update the graphics and the sound. So you got Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3. You also got the Lost Levels. So this is a good way to play those classic Mario games. I don't find myself going back to those games all that much, but this is a great game to have. It is an improved way to play the classic NES Mario games, which are great games. So I would recommend this one. Tecmo Super Bowl. I'm sure this game is good. I believe that the Tecmo Ball game for the NES is very highly regarded. This is another one that I have only fired up a couple times in my life, but it's one of these games I got years ago, like from Goodwill with a bunch of other games, I guess. So this I haven't really played much of, but I assume it's good. Donkey Kong Country 2. I mean, I just raved completely about Donkey Kong Country 1, but this game is even better. This game this is a top 5 game of all time for me. I really absolutely love this game. The music in Donkey Kong Country 1 was amazing, but this game's music I think this is the best video game soundtrack of any video game of all time. Unbelievable. I listened to that soundtrack all the time while studying. They improved on the tight controls and platforming from the first one. This is extremely challenging. The first game was very challenging, but this one was even more challenging. One of the harder games on the Super Nintendo. But this is just the perfect sequel. It's better than Donkey Kong Country 1 in every way. It is a completely legendary platformer
This game is literally perfect. Um, it might be I think it, like, sometimes I think this is my favorite game of all time. It's at least a top 5 video game of all time, but sometimes I'm like, this is my favorite game of all time. This is another game that I played on the virtual console in like high school. Um, but I literally can't recommend this game enough. David Wise is a genius composer, video game music composer, and this platformer is perfect. This is the best 2D platformer of all time, in my opinion. Family Feud, another game that I got um, with a bunch of other games that I never really played much. I think I played the game a couple times. It's just another game I happened to get, which was never really that interesting to me. Donkey Kong Country 3. So I'm actually of the opinion that this is another amazing game. I've seen some opinions, and I know some people who think that this game is bad. Like they say, oh yeah, 1 and 2 were great, but the third one wasn't very good, and that is just totally wrong. Like, this game is almost as good as Donkey Kong Country 2. It's not as good, but it really towards the end of it, it gets into this great groove of levels that are all phenomenal. Like, the second half of this game is excellent. I will say that maybe the first 2 worlds are a bit slow compared to Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong Country 2. But once you get past that, the game's smooth sailing. It's just as, after that point, it's really just as good as 1 and 2. So I think that, yes, this is probably the weakest of the 3, but it's not by all that much. It's still a really amazing platformer. Totally underrated. It's still a really big joy to play, and I find myself going back to play this basically the same amount as the other 2 Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo. So, so a very underrated game. Don't pass this one up. I have no idea why it's somewhat is considered a black sheep of the series when it's completely excellent. Super Metroid, another top 10 video game of all time for me. See, the Super Nintendo has so many top 10 video games for me. This is just an amazing, groundbreaking game. Completely immersive. The music's amazing. This game invented the Metroidvania like genre of games that many people still play today. There's new Metroidvania games coming out today. So this is another top game of all time. I've seen many top 10 lists cite this as the best Super Nintendo game, and they could have a point there. I think I might prefer DKC2 and a couple RPGs on the Super Nintendo to this one, but I think this game deserves all the praise it gets. There was one time where I was staying with my dad when I was in high school. I was staying with my dad for a few days, and I played this game on an emulator, and that was really. I remember having so much fun playing that game in high school on an emulator at my dad's house. So really, another 10 out of 10 game. I couldn't recommend it more. And then at this point, I do have this SD2 SNES. This is a cartridge that it's like an SD card reader. It allows you to basically download any ROM off the internet and play any Super Nintendo game. So you basically have to like put the ROM on this SD card and then put it in the top of this cartridge, plug it into your Super Nintendo, and then you can basically play any Super Nintendo game. So this summer I played Final Fantasy IV through this method. Final Fantasy IV is a rare Super Nintendo game that is expensive, so I opted to just play a ROM of it on this. Final Fantasy IV was an amazing RPG. I highly enjoyed it. I had played Final Fantasy VII earlier in the summer, and then I went to play Final Fantasy IX, and my discs were not working, so I was like, okay, might as well put this cartridge to the test and play Final Fantasy IV on it. I of course played. I'm talking about. I played the Final Fantasy II U.S. version. The Final Fantasy II in the U.S. is Final Fantasy IV, but they released this Final Fantasy II in the U.S. So even with the kind of a bad translation, that game was a complete joy, an amazing RPG. There's a few other RPGs on this system that are better, but I love Final Fantasy IV. And then now I want to talk about a couple games that I actually got reproduction cards for. They were too expensive. It was before I had this cartridge, so I actually bought reproduction cartridges of Chrono Trigger and Earthbound. And it was about 2 years ago that I played both Chrono Trigger and Earthbound. Chrono Trigger is a revolutionary RPG. It's like almost perfect. The graphics are amazing. The soundtrack is amazing, and then it was just a joy to play. It's like a perfect RPG, a perfect turn-based RPG. It's like the pinnacle almost of SNES era RPGs. There are some PlayStation 1 RPGs that got onto the same level as it, and there's another SNES RPG that I'll mention shortly that I believe is even better. But Chrono Trigger, I'm not going to show it because I don't own the game technically. It's worth like hundreds of dollars, and I wasn't going to buy that. So, but I did play it, and it was phenomenal. The other game that I bought a reproduction cart and played is Earthbound, and I like Earthbound even more than Chrono Trigger. While Earthbound's combat system might be viewed as simple and it's not, the combat is definitely not as complex as Chrono Trigger, but the story, the music, the vibes of Earthbound are second to none. Earthbound is a quirky, fun adventure that is honestly is means so much to me. It's a very emotional game, and it's extremely fun, quirky, and unique. Totally unlike any other RPG, like a Final Fantasy or a Chrono Trigger. And the story and the music really means so much to me. And honestly, I like it even more than Chrono Trigger. And honestly, it's in terms of my favorite RPG ever, it's got to be between Earthbound and Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 1. So there's my SNES collection. This is sort of a 2024 update, and I hope you enjoyed the video.